Okay, so today we are going to be talking about thoughts in general on time jumps when it comes to books. First of all, I'm going to talk to you about thoughts that I have, and then in the second half of this video, we're going to mix it up a little bit and talk about what other people think when it comes to time jumps, and I'll give you my thoughts on those thoughts. So the first example I'm going to give you, and really the whole reason that I even thought up doing this video, is the selection series. So the first 3 books in this series revolve around our protagonist, America Singer, who is entered into a competition which is kind of like The Bachelor meets the Royal Palace, in that she is competing among a whole bunch of other women for the heart of the prince, and whoever wins the prince's heart will also become the princess of this world called Ilia. So the first 3 books were really amazing, and by the time I got to the end of book 3, which this is book 3, there was a scene that I'm going to try and keep this really as spoiler-free as I can, where 2 characters were in a room and something massive went down. For months, I was sitting back waiting for book number 4 to arrive. I was waiting to see what would happen with the 2 characters in this room, because Kiera Cass, who is the author of this series, she kind of ended this book rather abruptly, in that we have the 2 characters in the room, something goes down, and then it just kind of stops very abruptly. So I was waiting for months for book number 4, The Heir, to come in so that I could continue to read what these 2 were going through in this particular room. But no, Miss Cass had other ideas. She decided to jump forward in time between books 3 and 4 at least 20 years. Now, there's no way of specifically knowing how far ahead she does jump, because not all the details are there in book 4. But from what we can guess from the information that we have, we can say it will be about 20 years. So these 2 characters that were in this room that I wanted to read more about while they were in that room, they've now left that room, and the situation is now completely different. This really annoyed me. There's a great saying out there, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I don't know why Kiera Cass had to jump so far forward in time. And now we're going to talk about my favourite series ever, the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. Now I'm holding up book 3, which is The Hero of Ages. Again, we have a conclusion to the 3rd book in a series that I absolutely loved, and I wanted to see more of. And so again, I found myself waiting for an extremely long time before I finally got my hands onto book 4, The Alloy of Law. Now, in between that time, we have a time jump of, again, I need to guesstimate here, but I'm going to say at minimum 200 years, at maximum 300 years. And this is something that greatly annoyed me, because the Mistborn series is my favourite series of all time, and book 3 ends era 1, which era 1 is my favourite trilogy of all time for sure. And I love those characters, and I got to know them, and really just felt like they were family to me. And then all of a sudden, these characters were just dropped. Who cares about those characters? Let's move forward 300 years, multiple generations, 3 whole centuries later, and pick up with book number 4. This really annoyed me because not only are we dealing with different characters, but because we've gone 300 years into the future, there have been developments that have occurred within this world that we don't have in the first era. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I've started to work out that I don't really like the 4th book in series. Here's the thing. In my opinion, when you jump forward in time, you are betraying your reader if you haven't fully resolved everything in the era that your readers are reading in. it feels like an absolute betrayal also to be shoved forward in time without any easing into it. I think a good compromise could be, if an author started off a book where they're going to jump you forward in time, to have the first chapter at least be a little bit of a, in between, I guess. Remember where we left off? Okay, we're back here again now, but we're now in chapter 3 or 4, going to jump forward then, because then we jump forward in the middle of the book rather than in the next book when we don't want to do that in the first place. I guess there are some pros for writers as far as doing this is concerned. If you don't want to talk anymore about the current era that you are in, a great plot convenience is just to jump forward in time. But it's my belief, as much as authors can absolutely write what they want to write, but that you really should keep your readers in mind. And if your readers are 3 books into a series, that's pretty deep. I mean, your standard series goes for about 6 or 7 books. If your readers are going to get halfway through a series and they're going to keep going, part of the reason why they are continuing to keep going is because they're loving the era that they're currently in. So propelling them forward does feel like a massive betrayal. It's something that I don't like. I am very angry, especially with Kiera Cass at the moment, and I was at the time with Brandon Sanderson. That's enough of my thoughts. Now let's go to thoughts of other people. So very recently I asked a couple of my friends to give me their opinions on time jumps in books. They have responded. I'm going to read to you what they told me. So first up we have, if the story can't be done without a time jump, then keep it. Just be sure it needs the time jump in the first place. I agree with that. And while eventually with Mistborn, when you get to the final book that has been published so far, by the time you get to book 6, you can kind of see why he has done that time jump. So I guess I can agree with that. But also I agree with what this friend is implying, which is if it's not needed, don't go there. So I do agree with that too. The next one says, so the journey in The Lord of the Rings was years. It was something like 10 to 15 years between one character talking to another about going on a journey and him actually leaving. However, if the routine or events are not necessary for the story, don't include them. Yeah, so again, it's saying, the same thing, that The Lord of the Rings deals with a trope that is my least favourite of all time, and that is the travelling/questing trope where you don't know where you're going and you don't know how you're going to get there, and it just becomes really boring because you end up following a sequence of patterns of travel, 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 stop, eat, sleep, be scared that people are coming after you, so travel, travel, travel again, stop, eat, sleep, be scared people are coming after you, travel again. And it just becomes not only repetitive but incredibly boring. If J.R.R. Tolkien had taken it upon himself to put some time jumps in there, I really actually would have appreciated that because it would have taken us out of that boredom. If it's boring and nothing's really changing and the only time something significant is going to occur is after a certain period of time, then by all means jump so that we can avoid that boring patch of time. So the next one says, start as close to the end of the story as possible. If you're watching an event unfold and then it's 6 months later, why not begin at the later point and then introduce the other part? I completely agree with that. If your goal is to jump ahead 6 months in time after, say, chapter 1, for example, start your book ahead 6 months in time. You can always explain what was going to happen in chapter 1 once you're there. So whether that's through an internal monologue of your character, if you always were planning to jump forward, especially really early on, I completely agree with that. Jump forward before the book begins and start at that jumped forward place. And if you have to, if the reader has to know things that occurred before that time jump, just find a way to fit that in once you've already jumped forward. It'll just make the ride so much smoother. And the final comment that we're going to read today is, if you have a large gap in time, that is fine. However, time rarely stands still. For example, a character that you leave alone for a certain amount of time will be a good bit different, which is easy to account for even with just a small paragraph. If you skip huge chunks of time, put some significant events into the text to make the passage of time feel real. I completely agree with that, and I'm actually going to give you a great example of an author who does this really well. J.K. Rowling with the Harry Potter series. There are many times where Harry and his friends are doing something, and then the next thing you know, we have jumped forward into another season, down 5-6 months, and that's because routine hasn't really changed. J.K. Rowling has a really good way to sum things up by saying something along the lines of, the next 3 months were quite the same, it was always routine as usual, but by March, Harry was da-da-da-da, and we might have ended the last paragraph with them being in December, for example. So if you have that little continuation link from the end of your last paragraph to the next one, it can be an extremely smooth transition. But when you are doing a very obvious time jump, that's when things can get a lot tougher to do. So do your time jump within the book instead of outside the book or between books. But that is where I am going to leave it for today. So I hope you did enjoy this discussion on time jumps when it comes to books. What are your thoughts on them? What are your pros and your cons? Be sure to leave them in the comments section below. I can't wait to hear, and maybe we'll do another video on this topic discussing what you guys were thinking. But in the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I'll see you again very soon. I post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I'll see you again then. Mwah! Happy reading! Bye guys! Bye!